I'm Melissa Carter, and I'm the blogger at You Only Have Your Shelf to Blame, where I talk about books that are authentically on my shelf. But this one is not authentically on my shelf full time. This is on my shelf part time because I do still have a library card. And I highly recommend people to not forget to have library cards. There's so many books in your library, and there's also audiobooks now that you can rent from. And it's not like the clunky stuff like online. There are online sites where you can get your audiobook online. And rent it from your local library. And the reason I laugh is, I've had a library card, I think, my whole life, even through adulthood. Every time I moved, I got a library card because I'm that kind of the nerdy kid who follows all the rules and everything. I got to get my library card. But it wasn't until I moved this last time. I moved right before the pandemic. And I was like, I'm not moving these books again. I love my books. But it's like, why do I constantly have to add to my bookshelf if I ever have to move? So I really, this time when I got my library card, I put it to good use. And this is one of the books that I got from my local library based on a book club that I'm a part of. American Dirt, Janine Cummins. Now, do you know about this book? We'll talk about it for a second, and then we'll talk about the controversy surrounding this book that confused me a little bit, but I do want to be sensitive to the situation. So basically, American Dirt is about a woman in Mexico, Acapulco in specifically. Of course, I think of Acapulco and I think of Love Boat back in the day, because wasn't that always their port? That's the first time I ever heard of that town, was in Love Boat. But anyway, it's apparently, according to the book, it is a town that crime has risen. Now, this is fictional, okay? So you also have to take it that fictional books, not necessarily always going to be accurate, or has to be accurate if it's fiction. We'll talk about that in a second. But in the story, a woman is a victim to the local cartel. Her entire family is murdered, and she has to find a way for her and her son to make it to American Dirt. Now, first with the book, I did not know about the controversy until after I had read it and then looked it up. Like, oh, let me know the backstory. Let me know about this author, And then all of a sudden, I was flooded with all these articles about how horrible people felt the book was. Again, from my ignorant standpoint, I read the book without realizing anything was wrong, and was gripped. It is one I will say with confidence that I think the first chapter is one of the best first chapters ever written in any book because of the gripping events and description of the first chapter is like nothing I've ever read. I mean, I was hooked. And I must say I was exhausted because this poor woman and her son went through such peril throughout the book. So I will say I don't know if I had the stamina for everything that happened. But the writing I thought was so beautiful. I thought Janine Cummins is a beautiful writer. So what is the controversy if you don't know about the controversy? That a lot of Hispanic writers came out in protest about how they thought that this was... it was drama for drama's sake, meaning that Mexico isn't really like it was described in the book. And they took offense that someone who lives in the United States, who is of Hispanic origin, but not full Hispanic herself, I believe she's white or is white with Hispanic. Nowadays, I don't know. I don't know who you give credit to, because it seems that if you are of mixed race and you have African American, then you're considered black. White never seems to be part of the conversation if someone is biracial, it seems. So if you're biracial with Hispanic blood, but anyway, I was trying to really find out in those articles I was reading about the controversy surrounding this book and what was the problem. And I think the problem was that she did not give a great depiction of Mexico, and that they were offended by that. And then there was a lot of talk about the fact that she wasn't Hispanic herself. And that concerned me, that she as a non-Hispanic woman, is not allowed to talk in a fiction book about the immigration efforts of a mother and son from Mexico. Because the first thought that came into my mind was S.E. Hinton. If that rings a bell, that's the writer for The Outsiders, which is a story about these orphan boys, and some just not orphans, but their parents don't really care about them. But the boys on the wrong side of the tracks and how they navigate through life. And S.E. Hinton was a woman. And so it made, so because she was a woman, was she not allowed to write a fictional book about the lives of young men? So I just think it's dangerous to tell writers what they're allowed to write and not to write about. Because again, this is a fictional book. If it was nonfiction and it was meant to be something that is a reference, I can understand. And then part of me had to also think, well, are writers frustrated that their accounts as Hispanic writers are not being as commercially successful as American Dirt was? And is that the motivation? So I enjoyed the book. I was exhausted by the book. I do appreciate the feedback and the controversy, maybe because just so that you don't stop visiting Mexico or touring Mexico, to keep you from traveling if you do want to travel there. But otherwise, I think it's a fantastic book. And there's a reason it was a bestseller. And there's a reason that when she wrote it, it was optioned by, I think, 7 different publishing houses, because it is a good book. It is a page turner. So American Dirt by Janine Cummins. Read it, and then you can make your own decision on how you feel about it. But it is worth a read. And again, now I've got to return it to the library because it's due. If you have any books that, again, you think that someone who is outside of the subject matter and they did a good job with the subject matter, like an author who's not a part of the group that they wrote about but still did a great job, leave it in the comments below, or any other book that was just gripping for you. And what do you think is the best first chapter of a book? Again, comments below. You can always go to You Only Have Your Shelf to Blame, which is the blog. So many other books on there that I talk about. And I hope you have a great time and a great week.